Alright, those of you that are in sweltering heat, let's see if we can't do a cool, nice, peaceful looking scene here. One of the easiest things to do for your kind of cooler temperature pieces is to just adjust the hue that you tend to be working in. If you're working in on a white piece of paper, then you choose a lot of kind of cool tones, the blue tones, maybe purples, greens. You know, you can have some cooler greens if you'd like to. On this one, I just start off with a cool base, which is a blue toned, in this case Stardream, but you can use any type of blue, cardstock maybe, construction paper, anything like that, okay? Alright, let's go with the snowy bank here, and I'll put it down about like so. We'll try to make it look, we can make it look like snow, but it could just be a nighttime scene, you know, with grass, but, you know, in Moonlight, you don't have all the different hues, you know, in terms of the reflected light. It's everything turns into, I don't know, kind of cooler tones, and everything just looks so much more kind of sculptural. Okay, now I'm using Brilliance Graphite Black on this. You can try certain types of other inks. I've tried stuff like the VersaFine Clair, and I don't know, when I tried it, it just didn't dry. It looked great when stamped like this, but it just seemed like over time, without heat setting, okay? Maybe you can heat set, you know, a different type of pigment ink, and it'll set on the Stardream, but for me, it just kept running, okay? And that's the same thing with dye-based inks. Maybe you try it, and maybe it works or not. A StazOn would work just fine, though. Okay, but I'm going to put in some extra tones on this and extra shading, and you can't really blend StazOn inks. It just dries too fast. Okay, so that is that. This is going to be a pretty quick scene right here. I have my maple pear here. I thought I would do some deciduous trees because we're going to have some fun with some paint pens on this. And the deciduous trees gives us a little bit more of an opportunity for certain types of looks um, with the paint pens, I believe. Okay, so I probably be a good idea to heat set this right here, but I'm just going to go in and stamp some of these trees. Now I have this paper towel that I'm using, which is going to maybe that's a little bit too rounded an edge like that. I just want to create kind of a horizon in the background, okay? And it's like these trees, in appearance, will be coming from that little, slope, I guess you could say, not really a horizon. I guess it's a horizon, but it's more of a slope. Okay, so we're adding those down. I could leave a little bit of an opening, but let's go ahead and just fill it up. Like about like so. Okay, so we have those trees in the background like that. When you're working on dark paper, sometimes it's kind of harder to see what you're doing when the light isn't reflecting right on it. So, something like that. But you can see it easy enough. Okay, so we have those trees like so. You can fill in with some extra trees. This could be when you do it in the background, it looks like bushes. When you do it down here, especially if you don't have the trunks, it could just be another bush or something like that. Maybe we'll do that. And I don't want the trunks again. I just want the kind of the foliage part of it. Okay. But that deciduous, or a little kind of lumpy looking foliage in there will be a nice opportunity for some paint pen detailing and, I don't know, definition, I guess. Okay, so that is that. Now I choose the Brilliance because it'll dry on this multiple different types of surfaces, even foils, which are really kind of notorious for not accepting inks, except for the solvent style of inks. But the Brilliance works really good for that. Plus, they're a little bit thicker, so or quite a bit thicker than like a dye-based ink, so you get a good solid black impression. It's opened up a lot of possibilities for me in terms of the different types of surfaces that I can stamp on. Okay, so heat setting, what I've learned that I need to do is, because I'm stamping on this self-healing mat right here, I really need to hold this up and not put all that heat down, because that self-healing mat can start to warp a little bit. So just your standard heat gun. Okay, now, from its wet incarnation to the dry incarnation, it loses quite a bit of value. It goes from something very black to kind of more of maybe a 70% gray, maybe? Something like that, but we're going to spray seal this afterwards, and that'll bring back some of the depth of the ink, okay? So spray sealing is kind of the great equalizer of, I don't know, kind of ink visuals, I don't know, whatever, depending on the incarnation that they're in, from wet to dry. Some inks look lighter when dry, some look a little bit darker. It just depends on what inks you're working with. Not really so much brand, I find, but kind of the type of ink, pigment ink, dye-based ink, etc. But spray sealing tends to kind of give them a look more indicative of a freshly stamped piece, when it's wet, which usually is the most vibrant and has the deepest values. Vibrancy means kind of the brightness, the intensity of the ink, and the value is the relatively light and dark version of it. Okay, so this image right here, you can see where there are, anytime where you see the black areas in there, that's where I've created kind of a darker, incarnation of the image in the shadows and whatnot. And in these lighter areas right in here, you know. Those are the areas that I'm going to hit with my lighter types of inks. So you have to kind of be an observer of your pieces and be able to see, okay, that it's dark right there, so I'm going to hit that with a little bit more darkness. And you know, it's all about kind of transitions. A lot of people come from kind of more of the solid areas, okay, so they're used to coloring in spaces, okay. This is coloring in spaces, but you're working with transitions more. Okay, so let's show you what that would look like, okay? All right, I'm going to work with a couple of different things here. One of the softest applicators that you can find, you know, just in theory too, is a cotton ball, right? It's really quite soft, and, you know, your cotton swab is another soft type of material, and thus it'll be a soft applicator. So in theory, if you use this the right way, you'll be able to get those soft applications of the colors and you know, looks that you're going after. Okay, so this is a Brilliance white again. It's because it'll dry. But here's the thing that everyone always, you know, kind of struggles with, because they're not used to getting kind of drier incarnations of whatever media you're working with. If you're doing a pen, you're getting that solid pen. You're not getting a 10% version of this paint coming out of a pen, you know. You can't take, you know, kind of a dark green like this and use it on directly, you know, without going into some blender or something like that and getting a lighter incarnation of green. So you can do it with a little bit. If you're a colored pencil person, you know, you get this. If you're a painter of any, you know, watercolors and stuff, you know, you can dilute paints and whatnot and get a lighter incarnation of it. You might do dry brushing. This is akin to something like a dry brushing technique where you get some paint on your tip like this, and you really blot off a lot of it. You have to be familiar with kind of how wet your pad is. My pad changes around all the time in the Brilliance inks because the Brilliance inks are fast drying, so when you have it even sealed up like that, sometimes, you know, even though it is pretty tightly sealed, it can dry in the pad like this, so it's not some sloppy, wet incarnation of a oil-based pigment ink, which pigment inks are. This just happens to have some kind of binder in it that creates kind of a faster drying situation. Okay, so that being said, let's start hitting this right here. I'm going to start off with some of my lighter areas, okay? So, like the top of this little slope right here in the snow, I can kind of paint that on, and see it's not like this big blob of paint, okay? It's a very light one. Now, I did get a couple little blobs when I went like that, but I just spread it around like this. And I just keep doing that until I get what I'm going after. Now, we can see that at this point in time, there's no more ink on this, right? But you see how smooth that is like that? I just kind of glided it on like that. It's a really fun way to work. It's kind of, you know, I don't know, kind of going on at an incremental pace, you know, for sure. And if you get too much of it down, you just blend it out like that, okay? Let's go into some of these other areas, and I'll just kind of keep doing the same thing. You can see I get, you know, I'm not perfect on this. I get little blobs, but I try to work with media, kind of second chance media. It's not like, this is kind of the opposite of doing something like, you know, I always kind of give the example of calligraphy. You know, people who are doing lettering and stuff like that, or Chinese calligraphy, I mean, it's like, you better get that stroke down perfect, you know, with like that brush type of, you know, calligraphy. I love that type of thing. Watercolor paints and stuff like that, something so gestural and spontaneous, but, you know, when I'm doing artwork like this, that's not the spirit of the approach that I want to be using, at least, because I want to have the chance to kind of move things around and to blend it out. But just like this, I'm just kind of blending it until I get it right. And you can see see that slope on that, and see when I do this on this side, I'll be blending it this way. Okay, see how this kind of the edge of this snowy bank looks like that? Okay, but see this where it's all about the transitions. It's not trying to fill up this whole area with solid white. It's getting kind of a transition of it going from kind of lighter white in there. I'm getting a little bit of a kind of blobby look here, so I'm just kind of spreading it out like this. I haven't done a lot of this before, kind of in this manner on this thing, but you know, if you know kind of the concept that you're going after, it's easy to do. I just don't do it fast, okay? And that's why I make it look easy. Everyone always says I make everything look easy because I use techniques and methodology that is easy to do. I don't go for like these big, spontaneous, gestural kind of, you know, you better get it down perfectly the first time type of movement or methods, okay? I do it where I can add it down and, you know, I can blend things out and whatnot. It's almost the spirit I'm doing this in. You can do this too. If you have like a white charcoal or chalk, you can use that on this too, you know? And it's kind of in that same spirit. Or if you feel more comfortable doing a white colored pencil or something like that, you can do this too, you know? Use a white colored pencil. It's any kind of white media that'll stick to it. Maybe you can do both, you know? Maybe you can go, you know, a colored pencil would be very detail-oriented. So maybe you can have some little detailed areas as well. Yeah, and do both. Why not? Like these little rocks in here, I mean, I can get in here pretty good with that. You know, but there's some rocks down there that are even smaller, that are kind of a little bit more difficult to get to. You know, this is kind of, it's detail-oriented, but not that detail-oriented, okay? All right, now let's take a look at some of these other areas in here. Like, see these rocks right here that have that little, you know, clump of snow on the top of it? All right, now I'm not done in here, but there's some areas in here that are just going to be easier to get to, you know, with a cotton ball like this, because it, you know, has a kind of a larger coverage. All right, so you just kind of blend this in. It's not a super fast process, but you know, I wouldn't say this isn't tedium either. Go like this, and get some texture in there. It doesn't have to be, you know, the whole idea of artwork and using tools. Although some would kind of, I don't know. I think they're kind of misguided in some ways, as it kind of goes against the spirit of artwork. Is, you know, it's not to make your handmade items look like they're machine made or something like that. Like, you know, it's never touched the hand of the maker. You know, it's the whole idea of handmade stuff in artwork, at least. Okay, now maybe if you're making some kind of, you know, clothes or something like that, maybe you know, you don't want to, I don't know, little mistakes or something like that in there. But with artwork, you know, brushwork and things like that in paintings, spirit of paintings, you know, it's to get, you know, that brushwork showing. You know, think about Van Gogh or Monet, you know, some of the most popular painters, you know. It's like super textured and, you know, there's a ton of gesture in it. Okay? So, that being said, that removes the need of, you know, kind of a machine-like precision or something like that. I certainly don't have it, and it's not something that I aspire to in terms of my pieces, you know. Let's make it look like I've never even touched it, and it's, you know, came out of a, you know, I don't know, whatever, a printer or a computer did it or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just think in rubber stamping, where it's handmade, you're making things by hand, we're giving things to people. I just think the spirit of the maker is something that's inherently kind of nice about it. It's like your signature or something like that, you know, someone's handwriting. It's just something all their own. It's, you know, it's two people's handwriting are rarely, exactly the same. Okay, see, this is coming around. See that whole area in there? It really didn't take too much time. But do you see kind of the things that I'm kind of going after now that you see this stamp, or now that you see it kind of coming about? Kind of the spirit of it, just the lighter areas, the things that are fairly light, which is a lot in this image right here because it's supposed to represent kind of snow. There's a lot of open area, so those are the areas that you can kind of fill in. But again, do you see how it's kind of transitioning from light to dark like that? I mean, you could fill it more, but I just think having kind of the darker perimeter like this kind of adds to more of a, I don't know, it's like a framed piece, where you have kind of the darker edge like that. Okay, now one of the things that's occurring to me while I do this, and sometimes I forget to mention it probably, is that when pigment inks dry, they dry darker than what they look like when they're freshly applied. So that's kind of good in some ways because, if you apply too much, it kind of disappears a little bit, but it allows you to go in and enhance and to build up more tone to give you more of that variation. Now you see where that's lighter right there? So you get an even stronger transitional range going from something much lighter. Okay. Usually when people do this, if they ever have a hard time, it's not from not using enough ink. It's from it's almost 100% of the time it's from using too much. So, you can just kind of let it develop like this. Let it dry a little bit, And like I said, if you think you put on too much, to begin with, then fine, kind of go in and spread it around. But, don't be afraid to just let it sit for a while and see what it looks like. Okay, now here, let's go for this kind of thicker kind of application. They call this, in painting, impasto, right? It's where you get kind of those little thicker additions, okay? Now, this isn't a brush, but, for all intents and purposes, we're using this as kind of a brush type of mark. But let me show you this real close up, and I think this is adding more to the spirit of the piece. It almost looks like a painting, adding this kind of thicker bit like that. But look at this kind of an impasto type of application of that paint right there. And it's not paint; it's ink. I almost think of this as paint though, because it really feels like you're applying kind of a thicker application. But see how smooth that looks from a distance? Okay, but look at that kind of that thicker textured area in there, and I really like that texture in there. It won't show up quite as much, again when it dries, but you'll get kind of a little bit of the spirit of it like that. So here's the thing where, getting kind of that application down like that, I think it looks pretty good. I was going to use a lot of these pens on there, but I don't know. Let's see how this goes. I really like this kind of look that's, we're starting to achieve right here. Okay. We'll see how it goes. That's one of the definitions of art, they say, is, kind of what happens between the initial concept and final result. I was thinking about, okay, paint pens on Lapis Lazuli. That's the name of this paper here. By the way, this is a quarter piece of Lapis Lazuli. It's one of my favorite surfaces to stamp on. Or it has turned into one of my favorite surfaces to stamp on. One of the things, too, this is what occurred to me years ago when I used to teach stamp board, which is now called clayboard art tiles, okay, is that when we're doing kind of reverse types of applications on that surface, stamp board is like scratch board where you can stamp on it, color it, and then scratch back in some additional textures. One of the things that occurred to me when we were doing that was I think that we almost use a different hemisphere of the brain or something like that when switching to my cotton ball here. Ooh, that's a lot of paint on there. So like that. Here, let's smooth that out a little bit. Or spread it around. When you're doing kind of light into dark, it feels like a different spirit maybe than applying dark on light. You know, like when you're using a white piece of paper. We're always applying media that we can see on there. Sometimes we do like a bleaching technique or something like that, or you can add lighter tones like a white colored pencil or something like that. But for the most part, it's a real additive process. But doing this light into over dark it feels different. Okay, look at this. Look at that, real smooth, kind of wispy look with the cotton ball. Okay, but again, I'm not trying to fill up everything here. Okay, I want there to be some variation kind of happening throughout. Okay, let's take a look at that. Look at that. Doesn't that look like Moonlight? Alright, speaking of Moonlight, let's do a moon, okay? Just a little punch. I borrowed this from my wife and haven't given it back. In a long time. I'm using this as a moon in a lot of different pieces. I wish I had like a ½ inch. This is probably like an inch right here. Let's put a moon up in here. Let's put that behind these trees in here, okay? Just a rip paper towel. And then I'm going to go like this, and we'll position this. We'll do rule of thirds and put that moon kind of rising from behind the trees. Alright, there. Okay. We'll just use the same cotton ball, okay? I don't think I want like a tremendously bright moon, so let's kind of tap this very lightly, okay? See how light that is? I can't see anything right now. That's control. Alright. I do want control, with most of my media applications. I don't have to have 100% control, but if I have like 80, 90, I don't know, that's fine with me. Especially, the bolder the object or technique that I'm doing, those are the things that I want to do kind of a little bit more controlled, because it's going to stand out that much more, right? Okay. So go like that. There's your moon kind of coming up from behind the trees. We still need to tone in the trees. Okay. All right. So, that being said, let's get right to it. Let's go with the cotton. This is getting really frayed on that side here. Let's switch to this side right here. And let's zoom in here. These trees right here would, it stands to reason that these trees would be a little bit lighter right next to the light source, right? So going in like this. And again, these trees, I'm toning in the tops of these trees right here, okay? You see these trees have light and shadow in it? Okay. I'm toning in the tops of them. So I'm not going to tone in this black part area on the impression. I'm just doing these parts right here. So you might see it doing like here, here, and here. See these 3 levels of kind of branches that are coming out towards us. Those are the areas that I'll hit on these impressions here. Now maybe at the top of the trail add a little bit more like that. And on the interior, maybe a little bit less. Okay, like so. Okay. Now, all I'm doing right now is I'm hitting kind of the highlight areas of all these images, okay? I'll probably come into them and start hitting, defining some of the shadows too. So we're making lighter the light areas of the imagery. And what we'll do with the black is we'll create darker areas of the imagery using black, okay? So you enhance your highlights and you enhance your shadows. You put dark in the dark and light in the light. Okay, now see where these trees are right in here, and on the side of the trees facing the moon, okay, I'll put more reflected light, okay? So these trees in the background, especially ones that are a little bit more distant from the moon, I'll put more of that illumination on their left-hand side. Okay? Do you see that? And by doing so, what we're doing is we're reiterating light direction and our light source, okay? So if you hit these trees over here, on the left-hand side, you're saying that the moon, or the lighting source, is coming from the left. It doesn't mean that you can't put any on the other side, okay? Yeah, but maybe put less. So when it comes to lighting, lighting isn't doing more when you're coloring. Lighting is doing less when you're coloring. So, like I said, a lot of people approach coloring from kind of a whole area perspective, okay? But in reality, if you're doing coloring for lighting, it means that you're doing less, because you're not coloring the whole thing. You know, you might have, if we're working on a white piece of paper and I'm adding blue to these trees, I'm adding less blue in the areas that are kind of facing the light. But we're working kind of on a dark piece of paper, so you know, we're kind of doing the opposite. We're adding lighting back into it as opposed to darker media. Alright, so this is going on. I'm adding, there's these little bushes down here. You know, in the background they're trees, but in the foreground they're bushes. Now I'm going with a very kind of blobby type of look, because that's kind of the spirit of these bushes down here. You know, you can see these, you know, little areas kind of sticking out, right? So I am reiterating that spirit with my Q-tip here. If you're going to do this with cotton, use cotton, okay? The synthetics are, to me, are completely useless in terms of application. Synthetics like polyesters and plastics and things like that, they don't wick, they wick moisture, okay? So they kind of, you know, if you're wearing like a polyester shirt, they're going to wick moisture. They don't absorb as much, okay, like a natural material like cotton. So it's just better to go with your 100% natural fiber. 100% cotton, you know, swabs. It's not like an expensive thing either. But they just work. I've tried the synthetics, and they just don't work at all. They feel softer to the touch, but it's that absorbency factor. They're like useless to me. For this type of application, you can use it for whatever, you know, you're going to use it for, whatever it's, you know, made for. But when it comes to this, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't do anything for me. Okay, so that is that. All right. There's not a lot of definition in here because I'm not doing detailed work with this, okay? Okay, now let's switch up here. Let's go with, I need a new cotton swab. It's one of those things, like a brand name's come to be, you know, known as kind of the default name of the the item, so I think of it as Q-tip, you know, like Band-Aid. Okay, so black. Now I just re-inked this, so there's a ton of black on here, so that's way too much actually. I want more of that application than that one right there, okay? So take this and let's give a little bit more depth to this piece. I don't want to go over my moon too much. Or if I do, I don't know. Maybe it'll look okay. But if I do that, I do it with a much drier version of this. Okay. And like so. Okay. Now I'm going to put this over some of my black in here too. Okay. This is, again, it's kind of framing the scene off a little bit more. I especially like it in my four corners, okay? Let's see if you can kind of tell, you know, what things look like in terms of a composition and framing when you add it to the four corners like that, okay? So that pretty deep black in those four corners like this. So I'm dabbing here because I don't want to smear that area down there too much. But see that, doesn't that kind of frame off our composition a little bit more, having it in those four corners like that? I think I'll hit this stream here a little bit more. I can just fold this like this, okay, and get kind of a little bit of a narrower area. All right. I think that's about right. And, you know, these rocks in here are dark, so you can kind of hit those a little bit more if you'd like to, or I don't know, come in here and add a little shadow underneath these trees in the background. I guess it could be bushes in the background too. We can just say this is a very close area, not kind of out there in the distance. You know, if it's far away, they're trees. If they're closer, they're bushes. Okay, so that is that. At this point in time, I'm wondering if I should heat set this a little bit. Let's go do some of these paint pens now. I'm not sure which one of these blues matches this blue on here. You know, this is kind of a specific blue. It's like a, I don't know, what is it, like a steel blue or something like that. But let's give it a try. Let's go ahead and heat set this a little bit, or quite a bit. You see that kind of little iridescence of the lapis lazuli like that. I mean, this looks good on just kind of your matte black too, like a dark black or something like that. But I don't know, you know, it just gives it a little bit of an extra, I don't know, element, I guess, you know, in terms of that reflective quality. That's kind of fun to play around with. Okay, so let's try some of these paint pens on here. Some of these big 3mm ones. That is really light. Let's see. Let's go ahead and give it a test here. Now I'm going to be layering this, so when this goes down, I have to remind myself of this too. When I'm doing this, it's not going to look like this in the end result, okay? Because I'm going to put a white over the top of this too, so. Okay, that looks really funky, alright? It's because it really stands out, kind of weird. But that will be kind of my base layer of additional texture. Okay. Now, that's not a dark blue. It's a light blue. But now let's go with a lighter blue in the form of this color, whatever color it is. Call it, maybe they just call it blue 1, 2, 3 or something like that. I don't know. But I'm adding this right on these tufts of this tree right here. Okay. it's lighter, so I'm not really adding it into the shadow area of the tree, or in this case, a bush. Okay. Let's go ahead and add some of it down here as well. That really stands out quite a bit. Everything is very, very soft in this scene from a textural standpoint right now. So this is a way to go back in and add a little element of sharpness. Okay. All right, now we're going to the white. Let's see how much this white stands out. I'm curious. Especially over the white. Yeah, it's quite a bit whiter than the pigment ink applications. Okay. It's almost too white. It's lighter than, it's like reflecting lighter than the light source, which is the moonlight, of course. Okay, but let's see how this goes. Okay, so let's put this on some of these top ridges of my well, whatever, snowy banks, maybe. Okay. It's kind of bringing it to life a little bit. I'll have to mellow it out some, okay, so it's like sparkly, you know, kind of reflective. Okay, putting some little sparkle types of reflections in my water. I'm going over some of these rocks down here too that are light in the water. Alright, and let's take a look here. That is really extreme. This is where I'm not quite sure what something will look like, but what I do when I get into the areas like this, I know that I'm just kind of in the middle of the process, okay, so I'm going to add in and kind of mellow out some of these areas with some additional pigment ink. So, things that are too sharp in here, I want that sharpness, but I want it just kind of blended in a little bit more. So I hit it with some additional white pigment ink, and that diffuses that light. It's like you're putting it in a little blanket of kind of illuminated fog, whatever those objects are or areas look like. This down here. You can probably barely see what I'm doing down here. It's because it's applying such a small layer with each, I don't know, kind of application or tap. Actually, I can probably use a little bit more. This is going a little bit, oh, that's a little bit too much, but okay, just adjust accordingly. Okay. Alright, see that kind of diffusion like that? Now let's put some more right here. Actually, that looks pretty good. I would have just done it a little bit slower had I, were I to do it again. But I just kind of did a couple taps, so I didn't do tons of taps there. So just kind of diffusing everything like this. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm cutting down the contrast between some of these little dots and the background. I mean, I'm bringing the background lighter. So there's not as much of that contrast between a little white dot and, you know, a darker kind of bank of snow. Alright, let's hit it with some of our little impasto types of applications. Okay, to really blend them in pretty good in some of these areas. It's kind of like this little oscillation. I always say that word, oscillation, because you're always kind of flip-flopping back and forth between maybe smooth and sharp, light and dark, kind of dull and vibrant, okay? Kind of a range of things. It's not just one thing or another, it's the range of all of it. But not too much of anything, well, unless you're going for some sort of, you know, visual statement and you want everything like super vibrant or something like that. But for me, I like to have kind of a nice range. I used to be into like much heavier contrasts. And I still like real contrasty artwork, like black and white artwork and things like that. But for the most part, I like it to have a nice big range of variation. You know, I think it's a little bit more, richer of a surface, potential surface, when you have a little bit of everything in a piece. Okay, now I'm looking at that moon. I'm going to illuminate some of these areas down here. And I really like this Q-tip. I've never done a piece where that had so much kind of Q-tip, little ball-y looking things. I guess maybe my work with using these pens, you know, has changed my, you know, or I don't know, expanded on my kind of notion of how to use this now, you know, in terms of getting a little bit more texture. Or it's shown me how to do it, maybe, I don't know, over this last 2 or 3 scenes, kind of playing around with that. So, you know, kind of my, kind of, whatever, aesthetics, you know, change, you know, with, I wouldn't say each scene, but maybe with each media that I like and kind of play around with and so on, yeah, so on and so forth. Yeah, that looks actually pretty good like that. Huh. Learning something new all the time. Well, not all the time, but sometimes it just happens a little bit faster. Expedient. Okay, so anyways, so let me show you what I'm talking about in terms of that texture right here. See that texture right in there, certainly right in here. I'm really hitting that, you know, and getting that real distinctive look, but look at that. Does it look a lot more kind of dimensional now? Okay, so that's that. Now let's, you know, when I was talking about that oscillation of crisp and soft and whatnot, diffused, let's go on in here. And let's add in some additional textures into this piece, and we'll go for some crisp. Okay. All right, this is the winter brush. Okay. Now I'm going to block off some of these slopes right here, these little snowy slopes, okay? Just with our masking, and we're going to add an element of crisp within soft, okay? It'd be better if I use the smaller one in the distance, but I'll just use the top of it instead. Kind of like this, okay. All right, now that stands out a little bit too much. See these 1, 2, 3, 4? But remember, that'll dry lighter than what it looks like right now. We'll heat set it too, and I'll show you exactly what it'll look like. Okay, so we have that. Let's go for some additional hanging leaves and try to give more depth to the piece. Okay. Okay, some hanging leaves. I inked up the whole thing because I didn't know how much of it I was going to use. Okay. So yeah, I'm kind of hanging it a little bit lower on over here, and I'll hang it lower here. And go like this. So it's a little bit heavier on both sides, and it kind of goes up like that. It opens it up. So again, this is kind of like a framing device. You know how I darkened in the corners like that? It's kind of the same type of concept here. You're kind of using this as a darkening agent to frame the piece off a little bit more, or a lot more. All right, I was thinking about using that same leaf down here, but that would just be way too redundant, so let's go with something else. What if we have room for like a deer in here? I think that might be good. Yeah, let's add in a little bit more framing here. Okay. Here's my reeds. I use this all the time. I have this on my desk all the time. Okay. So these kind of elements, it's darker inherently in the corners, but then you add these darker things like that. All right, so let's heat set this a little bit. This showed up a little bit too much. I like it in there, but I want to subdue it a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to dry this, and I'm going to add a little bit of frosting over the tops of those little limbs, winter limbs. Sure if I wasn't sure if that dried completely. Okay, now these look good in here, but let's transition them a little bit. I'd like to transition objects as in addition to areas, so where these transition right here, like into the snow. Let's add a little bit of mist at the base of them. So let's go back with our white. I don't know, you can put it over some of it and leave the other part alone. Okay. It's kind of incorporating the piece into the composition too. It's putting the same type of kind of atmospheric element or texture onto the, one of the smallest little details, okay? Meaning you're just kind of obscuring some in that little bit of fog, like, is prevalent in the rest of the piece. Okay, I think this is a piece that would really benefit from kind of a focal point. so let me get, I think I have the perfect deer for this piece. Okay, but I'll show you this. Yeah. See, now these winter brushes look pretty good in there, but they don't just stand out so much like before. They're kind of in that little veil of mist in certain parts of it. See, I didn't put it over everything. See right here, it's like kind of put at the base. Same with that one. So when you look at it as a whole, they don't stand out so much. I'm telling you, just, that's my big, I'd call it secret, but I really try to get everyone to do that, because it just makes, it's kind of the, I don't know, the big solution to everything practically. In terms of if something's not quite working exactly the way you want it to in a scene, you just cover it in white pigment ink, and it brings everything together. For me, at least, I can't tell you how many times I use that element. Okay, so I'm trying to think of a place to place this deer, okay? If I use the whole one, I think I could put it right here and it would show up. It has to be in an area that's not too dark in the background, otherwise you're not going to be able to see the silhouette of it. I can go with a bigger one, just have it right here in the foreground like it's looking into the scene, but I think something right here would be okay. Okay, so place the deer. Now, if this is snow, okay, one of the things that you want to do is maybe not ink up all of the feet right here, otherwise you're saying that the snow isn't deep at all. It's like if I just have it standing on snow like that, but I need to ink it up to about right here so that it's standing in, a few inches of snow at least. Okay. So you can either ink up all the way and just kind of remove the ink. Okay. Yeah, well, I inked up a little bit more than what I need. And then what you do is you just take a paper towel and just kind of wipe off some of that, which sometimes is better because it kind of transitions a little bit than just having it, ink and then no ink. You can maybe see where the deer is kind of like standing in the snow. Minute decisions, making sure that's where I want it. And this again it's with the Brilliance black. I don't need to hold it down quite so long, but why not? All right, so look at that in terms of a focal point. It changes the spirit of the piece, don't you think? Okay, having that focal point in there. I don't know, having an animal or a little cabin in the background, definitely a person. It makes an area really stand out. Okay, now that I have that focal point in there, I'm going to kind of enhance it a little bit more. I'll put some little kind of like highlighting around it, like it's kind of been spotlit. Spotlight in terms of this like being a stage or something like that, and you put your star kind of player in the spotlight like that. Okay, but that's not it. I want to do the same thing that I did with those the winter brush with the deer. So we'll put a little bit of fog around the base of it. Remember, this is Brilliance ink, so it has some kind of drying agent. Brilliance ink is kind of, it's like the a solvent ink of the pigment ink world. Okay. I don't. It probably would go on better. I think you can use like a StazOn you know, to stamp that out too at this point in time, or something like that. It would probably go in there. The Brilliance ink might be a little bit more solid because it's, you know, pigment inks are just so much more thicker of an ink to begin with, you know, than a solvent ink. Okay, so adding that little bit of pigment ink at the base of its legs. Okay. All right. And I think that is it right here. All right. I'm taking a look. Trying to make an assessment. I could put a little crystal down here too, like little twinkly bits in the snow or something like that. I'm going to let this sit a little bit, and or I can contemplate if I want to add anything. I don't want to add in any kind of more detailing because there's enough kind of little shimmery, kind of twinkly light on this. But the thing that I might do, yeah, we'll frame this off a little bit, and we'll mat it, and we'll format it up. And I'm thinking about maybe I'll do a quote stamp with this one or something like that. I'm not sure. We'll see what we can do in terms of formatting on this, and see if we can come up with a good card. Okay, I've formatted this with a simple mounting of a couple different iridescent papers. One is this, I think it's bear grass metallics, but kind of a shimmery white. It just gives it a little bit more of a reflective quality. I don't know if you can even tell. Plain white would be fine too. And I don't know. I just went with another piece of the Stardream surrounding. I guess I should do that more often. I think it looks pretty elegant to have the same color here as kind of within the piece. And I don't know, it was just, of all the papers that I have, which aren't really that extensive selection, I thought it looked best. Okay, now I'm going to go with a word stamp right here, and if it doesn't stamp out kind of light and opaque enough, I can always do a cutout of this and put it on there. But I thought, you know, I might as well just try for straight to paper first. And I'm just going with a simple word here. A kind of a longer quote isn't really appropriate for this piece. It would just take up too much space. But I thought a simple word like this would be fairly dramatic. Let's see how it looks. I'm doing this again in the Brilliance white. It usually stamps out pretty good in terms of opacity. It's not completely opaque. It's usually a little bit more translucent, but not too bad. I think, you know, I got it fairly straight. If I don't know, if I was bad and it came out, you know, awkward or a little bit angled or whatever, like I said, I can always stamp it on another piece of paper and place it right on there. But I thought that looked pretty good right there. So, I don't know, it makes for kind of a good graphic statement having that on there like that, I think. It almost becomes kind of an equal visual to the this as far as a focal point, don't you think? But let's take a look at this, and let's take a look at that Stardream paper right there. You know, when you look at it like this, though, I mean, you know, like I said, this paper right here, if you did it on like any type of darker paper, I think it would look pretty good. It doesn't even have to be blue. You can go with I don't know, like a dark green, I think would be interesting, or kind of a warmer tone, like a paper bag type of thing. Maybe a little bit darker things would be a little bit more dramatic in terms of the contrast that you would get from a darker paper. But, you know, you can do it on everything. But again, here's that little kind of shimmer to this, you know, this type of paper like that, having that on there. Gives it just that extra element of, I don't know, maybe elegance or something like that, just from the fact that it's more reflective of a surface. But anyways, let's take a look here. This is really giving it a been given a chance to dry fully. And see those little textural elements on there from the, kind of hard pounding of the Q-tip and pigment ink. I thought it looks pretty good. But I don't know. I generally wouldn't start it off on like that. I would, do those kind of softer types of applications on there to kind of build it up, and then I would direct my lighting a little bit more with, the kind of the more targeted applications of a harder kind of application of the medium. But anyways, thanks for a pretty good looking card like that. There were some times in here when things looked a little bit awkward, but again, it's about kind of applying, blending, and applying and blending, okay? When you first lay down certain types of things, it can really stand out. But the thing is that you just go back in and you mute it a little bit, or you subdue it. In this case, with the kind of those elements like that, those little shimmering types of reflective, dots like that, they really stood out really hard. So, kind of layering some additional textures in front of it for foreground like that looks pretty good. Like these branches in here they stood out too much. So you just kind of fog them over like that, and it incorporates them in with the surrounding area. Additional foreground at the top, additional little darkened areas like that, and everything kind of comes together in the end. But like I said, if there's any kind of lesson to this type of thing in a lot of my scenes, especially kind of the more experimental ones, is to just stay with it and to kind of, I don't know, you don't have to trust the process, but you just have to apply the process of seeing something through to the end types of touches, and then you'll get, a result I think that you'll be really happy with. A lot of times people kind of stop midway because they kind of panic or something like that, due to the results that they're seeing on step 3 or something like that, as opposed to, sticking with it and going to step 7, let's say, for example, But it's just like anything else, when you start with something, during the process, it's not going to be reflective of the end result quite often. And for me, like on this piece right here, I don't know, I was seeing new things all the time, and it kind of makes it a little bit more exciting in terms of the process that you go through in the creation of something, the creative process in seeing something. I didn't know what some of the stuff was going to look like, but I knew that the types of things that I could keep doing, in order to possibly get to a point in the scene that I would really like it. But I don't know, I like all these little elements like that. There's some really big elements that, if you just look at it, in terms of, one thing like that, I don't know how good those dots look, but, when you look at it on the overall, I think they all come together pretty good. Adequately. I'd probably do a better job in the future doing this, but I don't know. I think it looks okay in terms of a first try with something like that. So a lot of kind of new or twists on different touches that I've done in the past, but I don't know. I like the real textural thing. I think I'm getting into more texture, believe it or not. I've looked for that in the past, but I think I'm getting different textures from, the same tools that I've always used. And I don't know, that's exciting for me as a creator or whatever, and hopefully someone that's attempting to learn from, I don't know, new types of applications. So hopefully it's a indication that I have a reasonably open mind, and I think and it becomes kind of addictive in terms of your process, and being excited in terms of seeing something that you haven't seen before, and also kind of facing, I don't know, maybe some fears. I guess maybe that's not the right word, but I don't know. There's some trepidation, I guess. When I was working on this, I thought, I don't know if this is going to come out, but, just stick with it, as always. And I don't know, it's a lesson for me, too. It's something that I always have to remember and try to push, the boundaries. Okay, so anyways, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, you know, if you're in one of those hot, sweltering, humid areas, hopefully this has given you a little bit of a break from that, and hope you enjoyed the scene. Okay, we'll see you on the next